It's an honor to be sharing this space with you all. Obviously, we're going to talk about products. All the products that I'll be talking about is based on my experience, and my clinical preferences. So everything that I'll be showing to you today and sharing is what I do in my day-to-day practice. So let's get started because this topic is very exciting to me. Believe it or not, we do way more. We utilize optical illusion way more than we think we do in a daily basis. And I'm going to prove some concepts, and hopefully in the future, you'll be able to utilize them as much as I do. All right, let's get into it. So, optical illusion. Am I going to play tricks on you tonight? And the truth is, yes, I will. Some tricks. And actually, you're already doing those as we speak. Okay. Our brain are trained to do those things because illusion are the result of genuine and consistent mistakes in our perception. There are educated guesses based upon previous knowledge about the world that you've amassed. What does that mean? So basically, we are bombarded with thousands and thousands of information every single minute. Social media, advertisement, everything. So the brain, the gray matter, in, in order to avoid overload, will do educated guesses. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not quite right. And I'll prove it to you today. Okay? So my question is, let's decode this matrix because it is a little matrix, and I'll show it to you in a second. So whatever we're seeing most of the times are slightly different than we think we're seeing, if that makes any sense. So everything we're seeing in one way or another it's sometimes distorted. And how can we bring that to our benefit in dentistry, right? And my first question is this: can you read this? And the answer is yes. And why can you read this, even though we're missing several letters? Is because the brain is making shortcuts and uneducated decisions, right? And that's the same thing. What are you reading? So the brain already understands. So it doesn't need the full information to make decisions, if you will. So optical illusion, what is the concept of it? It's paramount. We cannot have optical illusion if we don't have one principal factor, which is light. If we cannot see it, optical illusion doesn't exist because it's all in the dark. If it's optical illusion or not, it doesn't matter because we can't see it. Now, when we talk about light, and everything will go around it, okay? So we're talking about values. Does that play a role if we use different values in dentistry? Shading or coloring, will that make a difference? And the truth is, it does. And I will prove those concepts in the dental field, right? That's what we're looking for. So line angles, contours, proportion, tooth anatomy, all of those little things will apply to our benefit or to our disadvantage if we don't use it well, right? Surface texture, does that make a difference in how we perceived what is being seen? Translucency, perspective, how you see it, it will make a difference. Coloring, and there's so many other factors, but those are the most important ones. So if I put you in this situation, so this recipient is watching the smile, right? So depends on what she sees, what light is reflected, she will perceive the teeth, in our case, in a different manner, right? If those line angles are contoured in a certain way, she's going to perceive, let's say, the tooth shorter or elongated. So this is very important, how we contour the tooth, but it's all based on lighting. Okay, and those are examples that we see in a day to day. So here on the left side, we see line angles playing with color and contrast, and that will give that impression of three-dimensional. And actually, it's just a painting. Shadowing effect can also play tricks on you. You know, this is not Aladdin flying, it's just the illusion that the shadowing is playing on that carpet. Now, perspective, as you can see, also can play a role. Is the gentleman looking straight at you or is looking to the right hand side? And of course, it's always a combination of different factors that will play and will give that final result that we're trying to see. Now, everything that we're talking about today can be applied on ceramics or composites. Okay, so it's not just ceramics. I'm a prosthodontist, so I do more ceramics, but all the concepts that I'm sharing with you today can be and should be applied in composite as well. Optical illusion in dentistry is best utilized when teeth are displayed in an unfavorable position. And that's what we want to take advantage of it. And what situations normally that will do. So this is an example that a patient came to me with this situation. This was what the dentist delivered. And of course, he was trying to close the gap, was not able to close the gap, and actually made it even worse, made it more apparent. In this case, the treatment plan and the execution wasn't done right. The lab didn't pick the right opacity, wrong contours, wrong anatomy, line angles, wrong color. Everything was not designed or treatment plan or executed ideally. And the result was, as you can see, not satisfactory. So this situation, the patient came to me like this before treatment, and you see diastemas everywhere. How can you, differently than on the previous slide, how can we make this smile look pleasant, right? Without making it look artificial or bunny teeth or etc. How can we make that? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How about this case? This case has diastema, conoid teeth, and misalignment. How can we make it look like it's real? Obviously, always being minimally invasive, because in my opinion, you should preserve tooth structure. That's the most important thing. So you should not compromise the integrity of the teeth for cosmetics. Okay, so we have to figure out a way to make the smile look good without destroying the teeth. How about this case? Patient came to me, front tooth, number 8, the needs was discolored and short, and she was sick of it, and she wanted to replace that one single tooth. She's 24 years old, so how can you destroy the teeth to make it look good? So one thing that I want to start talking about it is the value. So the value on in materials is this: the higher the opacity, higher the value. The lower the opacity or the more translucency, the value is lower. Now, the zirconia, historically speaking, had the highest value. Nowadays, zirconia has more yttria in it, so it makes it more translucent, more pleasing. But that's an overall, just for you to see in general, the difference in opacities and translucencies, okay? Obviously, we can make lithium disilicate very opaque, and we can make feldspathic ceramic very opaque, right? But just for you guys to understand the concept, okay? Ceramic translucency is also can be affected by many different properties like thickness, crystalline structure, number of firings, texture, etc. So it's not only the material that will make it more opaque or less opaque, but other factors as well. So here is Emax, and you can see the different ingots. and you see the different opacities and translucencies. Now, when we put it on a black and less saturation, you see all of a sudden the HO, the ingot on the right hand side of your screen, looks bigger. Okay, and I'll prove you in the mouth. So just start getting the concept, and all of a sudden you're going to say, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And how can we apply that in dentistry? So look at this slide. Which tooth looks wider? Oh, you couldn't see it right. Let's see, smile. Which tooth looks wider, bigger? And obviously it's number 8. It stands out so much. And when you go there, when you take the lips out, it looks even bigger. Of course, it's a little longer because of the gum recession. But when we see this, they are basically the same width. The only difference is the opacity. So more opaque will bring the value up, which will make you believe the tooth is bigger than really is. Now, look at this case. Which tooth is wider or more buccally positioned? And coincidentally is a number 8 as well. And you can see how big it looks. And the main thing is because of the opacity. And you can see there, it's not more buccally positioned, it's not wider, it's just more opaque. So we can make the teeth looks bigger. If we have a small teeth, we want to make it bigger. We can bring a little bit of opacity to stand out a little bit more and have that perception. Now, surface texture. You can see this is lithium disilicate. The left side, which is more orange, is non-etched versus the white side is etched. It completely changed the aspect of the material. Now, of course, we're not going to deliver anything on the outside etched because we'll aggregate food and whatever, but it's just for you to understand that surface texture can and will affect the visual result. On the right side, you can see it's polished and non-polished slab. And that also will change the perception and even change a little bit the color of it, okay? What makes you believe it's a different color. And you can see that when we put it in a different way. Now, zirconia has been out in the market for over 10 years, and we utilize it more and more and more. And they're looking more cosmetic than they ever been because they changed the structure. It's still zirconia, but there's more yttria, as I mentioned, nowadays. So it looks better. Now, if you want to make the zirconia looks more natural, you should pre-stain or you should stain before sintering. So you stain on the green stage so that stain will be absorbed by the zirconia and then you fire it. And normally that will give you the best and more natural result. Okay, but basically it's the same material. We're just playing with coloring and with that illusion. Now, probably you guys already seen this, but are those lines straight? Are they parallel? Are they horizontal and parallel to each other? And it's confusing because doesn't look like it. You want to believe it is, but your brain is fighting you. So when we take away the misaligned squares, all of a sudden everything makes sense, and now we have squares. So in our brains, we're trained to see patterns. And here, we don't see a pattern. So the brain gets a little bit confused. When we take away the misaligned squares, all of a sudden we catch it immediately. Now, if we do that in the mouth, if we make everything too square, the brain will look at and will recognize as artificial. Okay, so optical illusion is being used in many, many industries. Okay, so it's not like we don't know about it, but the idea is how can we bring this to dentistry, right? So you probably know this woman. And she she modifies so much, as you can see. Of course, there's probably a couple of plastic surgeries, but a lot of you guys, the ladies in general, they know how to play with makeup. And some of us also too know how to play with makeup, right? So this is what we can see. You see, some photos makes the eye look bigger, makes our face look thinner or wider, whatever we do to make our brain believes. But it's basically optical illusion. Okay. Now, if we bring that to our reality, if we play with the line angles, with the shape, the anatomy, we can really modify the result, the cosmetic result. So this is an example that I received the case. So this is the case, an implant there, diastema. He didn't want the diastema, and that's the result I got from a lab. And you're like, okay, we close the diastema, but you see the line angles and the shape and the opacity doesn't look natural. The teeth are too squarish. If you look, so we modify it, we request modifications, and all of a sudden the teeth looks a little more bigger, a little more proportional, a little more natural. And you're like, oh wow, but you changed so much. But in the reality is the length is exactly the same. So what did we do? We played with opacity, line angles, contours, anatomy, etc., to make us believe that that tooth or that smile is more natural. And this is the example, as you can see there. Oh, sorry, it went too fast. Hold on. So you can see the example there going, and it makes it more believable. Now, look at this case. I got the case back. We're doing this is a transformation we did on a case that was the canine was positioned in the lateral position, and but the result was very poor on the first slide. So I sat down and reshaped it and reshaped and reshaped it until we got to the right hand side after glazed. And all of a sudden, that canine looks more natural, looks more delicate, and it doesn't look like a canine. Even though the preparation, as you can see through the veneers, it's very, very, very thin. And again, it doesn't look well, the teeth are not longer or elongated because we just changed the contours. Again, that can be applied to a composite veneer. In a different perspective, now if we change the shape, it looked like the teeth all of a sudden became elongated. Now, if we put one on top of the other, the teeth looks like it's getting thinner as we speak, but they're not really. It's just the line angles and how we design it in a way that will look or make you believe it's more natural, more proportional. So those are the things that we played with it in this case. Tooth anatomy, line angles, opacity, translucency. So this case, it's a different smile I did. I distorted the image to again to make it the to make my point. So which teeth or smile looks wider? And obviously the bottom one looks a lot wider, but in reality is not. We just distorted the proportion. The same thing we do on the other way around. So I distorted the right image to make it look different, but actually they have the same length. Okay? So again, we can do this and we should be doing this a lot more than we can. Now, all the concepts are great. They're wonderful. And sometimes in my mind works beautiful. But in reality, we cannot put it in the patient's mouth because it doesn't work. So how do we know that our tricks and our design is working? And mock-up, to me, is the best way to know for sure. Computer design is fine, but it's not real. It can work and it cannot work. But mockup is one of the most tools available, and we should overuse it. To me, is underused. Normally, we just use for treatment planning verification, but actually we should look for cosmetics, phonetics, occlusion, reduction guide, preparation, reduction, verification, assist with occlusal records, temporization, test drive, final restoration, verification. So we should use this. And if you want to take a screenshot, this is a very important slide, I believe, that we should be used the mock-up for. Okay. So when I'm doing mock-up, those are the materials that I have handy. That's another, if you want to take a screenshot, that's a good one too. So I always use putty. I always have my curing light because if I need to do any modification, I can. Integrity material, I use those because sometimes I need a little more whiter, I need a little more translucent, I need a little more opacity. So it depends on each case, but those are my materials of choice. I use, a bonding agent, flowable, and some polishing materials and the glaze. So that's what I use for mock-up or temporary. I don't use anything else actually. Okay. And they work very, very good in my hands. Obviously, there's other materials that are wonderful and they work great, but those materials that I'm sharing, they work great in my hands. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. So this lady on the left-hand side, amazing. She wanted to uh, redo her smile and we did the mock-up. She approved it. And obviously on the right-hand side, she's all glamorous and beautiful, but the smile looks pretty much the same. So everything that we're designing was applied and was correctly applied. She approved it. We can copy, and that's a beautiful day. A more complicated case, a full mouth rehab, we've done, and severe wear. We did the mock-up. Everything loved it, and he even shaved it off because he likes his smile so much. So can be used, should be used, and should be overused, the mock-up. Very, very important. Now, let's go with the case. So this is that case that we talked about in the beginning. Patient has a lot of diastemas everywhere, and she obviously didn't like it. And let's see what we did. So we do the mock-up. Okay, let me see. So mock-up, I normally trim the vestibule so it's easier to clean afterwards. You wait that minute and a half to 2 minutes, and that's what you got. So normally it's a pretty clean result. I do, obviously, if I'm prepping that day, I don't numb to do the mock-up because I want to make sure, one, I like what I see. I can confirm the movement of the lips. Everything is approved. Then I can numb and go ahead. Patient, if they want, on the mock-up presentation, they can see it. We take photos and everything else, and everything else is approved, and we can continue. So it's a lot of less headache and guesswork is avoided. Now, so this is that case. Again, we have diastemas everywhere, left, right. There's no way to hide. So in a way, several of the spots is already prepared. So that saves me a little bit. Today, we're not going to talk too much about preparation, but I will show you the prep. So very conservative. Here in the middle between the diastema, the preparation needs to be slightly subgingival, where the buccal is epigingival or equigingival or supragingival, because you can make invisible margins. And I'll show you on the last case, how can we make invisible margins, okay? So if you don't need to break contact, I don't. If the contact is already broken, like a diastema, then we have to involve and we have to make it subgingival. Otherwise, you're going to have a lip and an inflamed gum, chronic inflammation on that gum, okay? Now, when you're prepping, you have to prep to shape form. What does that mean? You have to know the end result and all the contours, the modification on the contours you did in order to do the preparation. Okay? So it needs to be, the prep needs to be shape formed to the final restoration. If you don't, if you prep every single tooth the same way, you won't be able to take advantage of the optical illusion. Okay? So here is the preparation. Wherever you don't need to break contact, you don't. This is the temporary. Okay, so temporary, as I mentioned, if I want a little more translucency, I use Luxatemp. If I want a little more opacity, I use ProTemp or Visalis in general. So it depends on each case. Normally, the more opaque is a lot stronger than the little more translucent. So it depends on the situation. And you can see that we put a little optic glaze and everything looks fine. Now, can we do any modification from the temporary? And the answer is absolutely. If we do the temporary and we believe we can make a little better, then we should take advantage of it and modify it, right? So this is the end result. It does not look like she has diastema or big teeth for that matter. And I'll give you more different close-ups. It doesn't look like it. Now, what did we do? And I'll show you what we did because it's easy to show beautiful cases and this and that. But if we don't give you the recipe, then what's the point, right? So this is basically it. If I could put a little recipe or a roadmap, if you will, on this particular smile, you can see. So the tooth, this white line is the mid tooth, right? We're using the mid tooth, but the anatomy cannot be the same. Why? Or traditional. Why? Because if you have a lot of reflection between the line angles, then you're gonna have a tooth that looks a lot wider than it really is. And the tooth is wide, right? So we need to play with shadowing effect, depression, reflective areas, S effect, and all that in combination to make sure we have the right amount of light bouncing back to make us believe that that tooth is not bigger than needs to be. It's proportional. Okay, so here you can see a close-up without that roadmap. And here on the right side, you can see it looks very, very natural, although we have big diastemas between them. How about this case? You have diastema, you have rotational, you have conoid teeth. He's a young dentist, actually, when I did his smile. And look at the proportion. Not very easy to treat, right? Let me show you this. So 85% on the front teeth, that's fine. That's not bad at all. But the laterals are 100 to 120%. The space, the width, the gap that we had between the canine and the lateral are wider than the length of the tooth. So how can we make that better? Well, one thing we can do, we steal a little bit from the canine, we steal a little bit from the central, and then we distributed that space to make it more proportional. And we're going to talk about this case a little bit more. But that's the other thing. How can we make this, again, conservative because it's important, having that tooth sticking out so much? Well, ortho. And that's the easy answer. And it's true. We could, but the patient, you know the story, don't want to do ortho, whatever the case is. And trust me, I tried. He's a dental student, but didn't want to do it. And he been to my lecture and said, can you do minimally invasive? And I was like, yes, I can. So this is the incisal edge position, if you will. And if we try to bring that lateral in, we're going to do endo, lose that tooth. So how about if we bring the teeth out a little bit? Now, we can basically doing a lot of additive technique, very minimally invasive on the centrals and the canines. The lateral number 7 will have to be a little more prepared, but everything else is extremely conservative. So you can see here the steps that we're going to be doing. So in this case, I did the wax up. So for me, it's easier because I wanted to know exactly where I'm taking teeth away and where I'm adding. So I was doing the case and you can see already taking shape and everything is like, okay, I think we can do that. And you can see the steps of the process. I had to take a little bit off of that lateral. There's no way around it because otherwise the teeth would be too buccally positioned. And then you can see the temporary is there. And I'll show you the preparation. So again, this was done with Emax, injected Emax, so that's why we have this. Normally nowadays will be milled, but you can see the contours in pink there, how much different they are. One thing that I used and the lab almost didn't let me use it. I was like, no, we gotta use it. And that's what we're gonna do it. And sometimes you have to be a little stubborn and courageous to do that. If you see the laterals that were sticking out, I made it with a more translucent ingot. And you can see there, almost by translucency, special number 7, a little bit of show through. But remember the proportion. So I make the two centros more, I added more value, I added the opacity. So you make the teeth looks bigger. Where the laterals, I make the teeth look smaller by increasing translucency. So and you can see here the result. This is a super close up. Obviously, now that I pointed out, we can obviously easily see the laterals being a little more gray, but in the patient's mouth, there was no, you can't tell. So in this case, we prep to shape form. So we have to know the exact shape we're going to be designing the veneers in order to prep it accordingly. So the line angles were worked on, the anatomy on the laterals, especially they're not normal anatomy. In size of embrasures, different values, materials, different translucencies, and of course perspective. If you turn sideways, then you will be able to see more that anatomy. Now, perspective, very important. So everybody's seeing a circle on that yellow wall? I'm assuming yes. And how about on the blue wall? We're seeing a square. So it depends who you ask, right? And everybody's right. So it's all about perspective. Same thing here. Look at this beautiful house. I'm sorry, Catapult. I have to do a little pitch. Didn't tell nobody, but I'm selling my house. If you want to buy it, please contact me, reach out. Beautiful Asian style home with amazing pool side. So if you need, let me know. You see, but it's all about perspective. The pool is not that great. It's just a good angle of that photo. And by the way, it's not my house. I'm not selling anything. But it's all about perspective. Can you make us believe when we design a smile that is real? There's no problems underneath it. Line angles and perspective. Look at those, the red, the green, the blue, and the yellow. Look at the angles. What would you say? 60 degrees, 90 degrees, whatever. But in reality, all of them are 90 degrees. It just depends how you see it. And the brain is making those erroneous assumptions, right? That's the optic illusion. Look at this case. Patient is doing ortho, young kid, and the orthodontist didn't know where to put the braces, right? Where to put the teeth. Should we connect to the lateral, get closer to the lateral? What should we do? So basically, this was used easy shade. We did with the braces the restoration, which was pretty tricky. I took the wire out and all that, and then I designed the teeth as much as I could in order to make it believable. And then the orthodontist just finished it up. but it can be done, should be done. Again, this is composite. Same case. Look at the space. So should we move mesially or distally or right in the middle? What should we do? So the idea is to make it as much as possible. We have to use the optical illusion, close the gap significantly, and now everything else becomes easier. Okay. How about this case? Conoid teeth implant. So now you're playing with zirconia, lithium disilicate, maybe feldspathic, titanium, zirconia. I mean, you name it, everything. So again, minimally invasive, but it's just to show concept. Perhaps on the buccal, supragingival, custom open tray. I like open tray impressions. When I do it, I use flowable, and we did veneers. If you're doing physical, which I like, you have to look at some important features on impression materials. Has to be dimensional stable. Has to have tear strength because when it goes in between the interproximals or into the sulcus and we're going to pull it out and you don't want to lose that margin. Elastic recovery, exactly. When we're pulling that from that interproximal contact, it will stretch and should come back to the original position. Has to like somewhat like water, which is not, it doesn't really happen because it needs to be dry. But if you have a little bit of saliva, you shouldn't jeopardize the entire impression. Flow characteristics. Sometimes you put a wash material and before you know, it's already going down like you're doing a dual and a triple tray impression. You know what I mean? So we have to have a viscosity that is viscous enough that can flow into the sulcus, but it's not going to run down to the opposing arch. Color contrast, it's important. Some materials has like green and light green, which is not very helpful. So you have to have contrast in the material. And of course, working time. If you're super fast, you can use a fast set. If it's not, then you can use something slower. If you're doing one tooth versus a full arch, so those varies. And those are the materials and instruments that I use when I'm doing final impressions. Okay, so I love this, and that's what I use literally in every single impression. Okay. Um, and you can take a screenshot and there's the names there, and if you will. I do digital and I do physical still. Digital works amazing, but I love physical, especially sometimes you don't see that little margin that was covered, and the physical will give me that detail. Okay, so that's what I use. It works amazing in my hands. You have different sets and different viscosities as well. Okay, so this is that case. So we're doing I did the temporary because I'm developing the profile. As you can see, I told you the more translucent one in this case was the Luxatemp. You can see through. It's a little more cosmetic, but you have the titanium abutment, it was showing through gray. So what I did, I kind of trimmed, I let the patient was fine with it for a few weeks. So when she came back, we trimmed, we made a little window. I put this opaque composite, and that's a I use to when I'm blocking any dark restoration, I use this restorative material and it's extremely white. It's slightly pinkish, but it's very opaque. So you can block basically anything. And you can see here using the same temporary material now, it's blocked and you can again see through there a little bit. So with that knowledge, you take photos, you show to your lab tech, and then you can create that exact ideal restoration. So here you can see we have titanium, we have zirconia, abutment, and in order to make everything looks the same, we utilize a hybrid approach, if you will, and we cemented a lithium disilicate veneer on top of that zirconium. Okay, so and that when you smile next to the other Emax, it will look better. It will look the same as you can see here. Okay, so it looks much more alike. They're more, and we just did 4 teeth on her. Here, the before, the after, and the profile photo. And what we did to accomplish this, so we utilized the emergence profile. So we created that emergence profile, was not given to us. So different materials, as I mentioned, we use titanium, zirconia, and lithium disilicate. Obviously, lithium disilicate and zirconia has different values and opacities. So different restorative properties. We use restorative procedures, I'm sorry. We use veneers and implant crowns. We play with line angles and texture because we have conoid teeth. So we need to make them look bigger than they really were. So this is another case. You can see here, patient broke the central. She had crowns and veneers on the front four. Very dark stump shade. The papilla is it's even purplish because of that discoloration, and you can see what was underneath. So how can we make it our life and the lab life and the patient's life easier because they don't have to come to the office 250,000 times? But so I use the same opacifier, the same restoration. It's very opaque. And again, sometimes if I have enough space, I use that opaque and I use a tooth colored, like a dentin shade to try to make it look as similar, as close as possible to the adjacent tooth. So now the lab tech has a similar stump shape to work with. Does that make sense? But we want to try, I like to try to block it out as much as possible. Okay, and this is the result. So we have 4 restorations done there, 2 crowns and 2 veneers, and the results are very, very, very good. Even the purplish gingiva looks a little less. There's a little discoloration because it's coming from the root, but the result, the patient was very happy. And if the patient is happy, trust me, I'm happy. So this is a close-up of that case. And this is the last case that I want to show. I know this topic is very exciting to me, and there's so much more we can talk about it, but I'm giving you concepts and ideas that you can apply that starting tomorrow, literally. So we're doing this front case, front tooth, right? We took it out, had old composite. And how can we make, and this was a fragment veneer. I didn't do the entire veneer. So my preparations, I always polish. As you saw it before, I always polish. I use the black, the diamond to prep. Then I go with the red and I go with this Dura white, the white stone. Sometimes I modify the tip of the stone, but that's basically my preparation protocol. So the smoother it is, the better adaptation, right? And then of course there's techniques to make that surface more adherent and more bondable, if you will. So the margin in this case to make it invisible has to be irregular, taper with infinite margin, like feather edge in a way. So it has to be tapered. It cannot have a lip. It's not a butt margin. It has to be a fading off margin, okay? And it cannot be perfectly symmetrical. You have to make a wavy finish, if you will. So here it is. So the preparation, how we temporized it. So we have, I do a little bonding to it. You have to, otherwise the temporary will not stay in. This we use Visalis as a temporary, but it doesn't cover the entire surface of the tooth. Okay, so this is the temporary. You can see the tooth itself is slightly more discolored, but and we were able to mask and make that margin very, very invisible. And this is the final restoration, right? So invisible prosthetic margins. So we use feldspathic fragment veneer. This is from Kozer, but the margin is on the middle incisal third. If you pay attention, is about the middle third there. You can see I cannot use my arrow to show you, but I believe you guys can see it. So it's very invisible, and that restoration, once it's polished, it will last you as long as a regular veneer. Okay, so and this is the result. Patient is happy, young kid. I believe she's 24 years old, and I just didn't want to prep her teeth more than needed to be. So basically, I just replaced the composite. Could we have done in a composite? Absolutely, we could. And it's a flaw. Maybe I'm better with porcelain, or maybe I have a good lab, right? That's very important. You have to have an amazing lab that you have to partner with, and and that will make your life a lot better. You're going to have to pay a little bit more, but the result is exponentially better than what you get on with average lab. So use it, especially for cosmetic cases. Maybe in a posterior molar, and you don't want to have that beautiful anatomy. You want to save a little money. Fine, I'm I guess okay with that. I try to use a I'm biased with my lab. So I love them and I have to be able to, and I use them for everything. So I don't discriminate if we're doing posterior or interiors. I use them and the results are very consistent and as you can see, all the cases was done with the same lab, just to let you know. So in this case, we use infinite taper margin, translucency to match, and the value has to match. Okay. Now, clinical experience is making the same mistakes over and over with increasing self-confidence. I love that saying because sometimes we're very, very, very good at doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing because we've been repeating it so much. So I really appreciate you all being here. I hope I gave you some new inputs that you can apply on your clinical on it tomorrow if you can. All right. Well, thank you. I know we're about time. If you need to reach out to me, please do so. Normally, it's easier via Instagram, so you can scan the code. The blue code on the right-hand side, that's the lab that I use. If you want to check it out, please do so. But if you want to reach out to me, Instagram normally is the easiest way. It's my name, it's Dr. Roberto Macedo. So with that, I'd like to thank you once again, and I'd like to open the time for Q&A if you guys have any questions.
Okay, we do have a few questions coming in. So the first question is what magnification do you use for minimally invasive preps?
Ooh, right. That's a great question. I started with 2.5, and then I went to 4.5, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I'm getting older, so I'm going bigger. So now I use 10. And people say, oh my God, it's crazy. And it's crazy-ish, to be honest. But it doesn't, it's not like I don't see the tooth this big, I see the tooth this big. So in my mind, it's like if I can't see it, I can't treat it, right? Sometimes I see some hemoglobins and white cells there because the magnification is too big, but I like it. So what I've been using is a Lumadent it's an ergonomic loop. It's not as heavy as other brands that I used it for years, to be honest. So I'm very, very happy with that. And I changed it last year. So it's been a year since I'm using it, and I'm very, very pleased. So it's not that crazy, the magnification, but that's how much I use nowadays.
Okay. For the implant crown case, why did you use a hybrid approach instead of PFC?
That's a great question. So because we're using like lithium disilicate on the other ones, and if we have zirconia, of course, if it's stained, then it won't look right. So we, in our mind or philosophy, we have to have the same material on the outside to look the same because not the physical properties, not a big deal, but it's the light properties, the reflection, the absorption of the light is different, depends on the material. So if we can uniform, I don't know if that's a word, if we can make everything uniformly with the same material, then it's easier on the optical reflection and absorption of the light. That's all. If I had, as an example, if I did feldspathic, probably I would use feldspathic on top of that zirconia. So it doesn't need to be lithium disilicate, but whatever material you use on the outside, you use it for everything.
What camera did you use to take your dental photos? The results are amazing. Thanks for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. I have a couple. I have Nikon that I haven't used because it's old, but nowadays I'm using a Sony A7 with the twin light. Yeah, A7 twin light. That's what I've been using the most for intraoral photos. Thank you for the compliments.
And what kind of cement do you use and are there any specific procedures with that?
All right, this is a little bit specific. What procedures?
Yeah, what cement and any specific procedures for that cement?
Right. This is, and again, it's another long presentation, but basically, if I'm doing veneers or thin crowns or full veneers, if you will, I use I use flowable cements, flowable composite. I don't use really cement. I use flowable composite. I like the property materials. The mechanical properties are better, in my opinion, than cement. I like the viscosity. I know some cements varies in viscosity. I use Luxaflow the most to cement. Sometimes I use Easy Shade to cement as well, all flowable, because if I need to modify the light because my veneers are very thin, I can take advantage of the cement sometimes to tweak the color. I never use opaque cement for veneers, never, because it kills the translucency. Um, Protocols, normally I clean it very, very well. My preps are all polished, but I use aluminum oxide to etch and clean the surface to make it more bondable, if you will. But I mean, trying to make the long answer as short as possible.
Okay, a few more questions regarding the lab. So I did put a link to their Instagram page in the chat box. Again, I will email any links regarding the lab information in our post-webinar follow-up tonight. Also in the chat box are some sponsored links, but we do have a sponsor that is on with us tonight, and we'll share a message in just a few minutes. Um, okay, the next question is, are you using BioClear Concept?
Um, hmm. The honest answer, not yet. I've done it few cases, and I think it's pretty cool. It's very amazing. There is other things that I'm trying to utilize more is doing a little bit more composite veneers because sometimes when you're doing one tooth, it's a bit easier. And especially with the new composites nowadays. I know Solventum has a very, very interesting matrix that it's been out in the market and they're revamping it and it's looking extremely promising, especially if you want to do, a little bit more affordable single units or even a full smile. So it's pretty cool.
So I know you just answered a question about cementing, I'm sorry, your cement of choice. I was typing during that answer. So a few follow-up questions to your cement of choice. They're wondering about uh, which cement for full coverage crowns and inlays and onlays.
Um, okay. So it all depends on the thickness. I use Velo as my curing light. So I think it's the gold standard. It's very strong, collimates well, so it goes a little deeper than most of the other curing systems. So with that said, as much as I can use flowable composite, I'll do it. Right? If I know for a fact that the light will get to that margin, into proximal margin, normally that's the issue, I will use flowable cement because again of the mechanical properties and I have more time to play. If not, I've been using and I call oh Rachel gonna kill me, but it's I call the orange cement. Okay, so it's from Solventum. Is the I know but it's the orange, the dual cure self etch, and I etch and do all the steps. That's what I use the most. I also use a couple of other cements, dual cure, but that's what I use the most is the orange Solventum one. I slipped my mind, sorry.
And Solventum is online. So Rachel, if you want to just type
Yeah.
in the name of that cement in the chat box, that would be helpful to everyone.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
okay, and then let's see, a couple more questions. Two more. What is the most aesthetic composite you recommend?
Mm, okay. So again, I'm a prosthodontist. So take my advice with a little grain of salt because I do way more ceramic than porcelain. But again, I use some composites now and again. And I've done some very, very good cases that I'm very pleased with. The Easy Shade, I really liked it. Um, Grandioso for you, I think it's Voco. I liked it too. Those are the ones that I've been having the best results, because I don't have 25 different shades in my office. I don't. And those composites doesn't have that whole scale of colors. It's less. Now, for what I do, it works amazing. Okay, so I think Easy Match, Easy Shade has three colors: bright, natural, and warm, and the Vocal has four shades. Now, what you have to do it, in my opinion, is they have to be warmed up because otherwise the handling would be a little harder because there's a lot of um, particles in it. So you should use that warm because otherwise the handling will be harder. Those are the composites that I've been using the most.
Okay, and final question is, do you use the divine rule 1.68 to 1? And how
No.
prone are the infinite margins to stain?
Okay. I do not use golden proportion at all. The smile, it has a historical. value to it. Okay. But it doesn't apply for smiles because normally the laterals, the teeth will look too narrow. The smile will look narrow, and we like a little more wider smile. So red normally is a better proportion. So I don't use golden proportion for smile design. In my opinion, is not realistic. It's less than a quarter of the cases that will, it's less than 10%, I believe, that looks right. Okay, it's just in a specific situation. And the other question was, what was the other question?
And then how prone are the infinite margins to staining?
To stain. If you polish well, if you polish really well, that margin will be like not 100% sealed, but will be you're gonna have the best margin you ever done. Okay, it's literally you can barely feel it. The cement line is is incredible, incredibly thin. It's a lot different when you do feldspathic veneer. It depends on each technique you do with, refractory or platinum. The margin are so uh, perfect, if you will, that when you burnish it, when you polish it, it just disappears. So the cement line is extremely thin. And if it stains, you can just kind of polish a little bit more, but it will take years and years to do it. If the patient has good oral hygiene and good oral habits, of course.